where horror lies.
Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe. I'm your Wednesday evening host here at BodyBags, and we are at week 451. That puts us almost basically right in the middle of June, right? And we are in a 2-week stretch of random reviews, which will take us to the end of the month for my theme week, which is Asian horror. And I've said this before, but I'll be officially reviewing The Sadness, that Taiwanese film. Rob Jabez, very much looking forward to that. But today, this is a random week, and in the dog days of summer, it's kind of hard to, sometimes it is, to figure out where do you go next. And so I thought I would go to a place that, quite frankly, I'm not that familiar with, and that is Henenlotter, and I'm a little familiar with. I mean, back in the VHS days, renting movies out of the video stores, you'd see Basket Case on the shelf. You'd see Brain Damage on the shelf eventually. This is an 88 film from Henenlotter. This follows about 6 years after Basket Case. And then in 90, he'll return to Basket Case with part 2. And then eventually, I think, wrap it up with part 3. Now, I do have the, is it Something Weird video maybe release of Basket Case, which is, it's a pretty old release. But Brain Damage. Now, I got the Arrow release of that, and it is a fine release, I must say. Reversible cover art. This is, of course, the original. This is what we would have seen in the VHS stores. I would imagine. I'm pretty sure I remember this. But Henenlotter, this is a cat that now, I mean, I'm familiar with some of the ideas, like the grimy New York setting and just aesthetically. But Brain Damage is the first movie really of his that I've decided to just kind of wade into and really take a real look around. And I must say, I was pretty struck just by the jumping quality from Basket Case. Of course, he shot that on 16 millimeter, and with this, he got to shoot it on 35 millimeter. Just production value alone, the jump from Basket Case to this is pretty significant. I think he shot Basket Case for about $35,000, and for this, it was just under $1 million, I think. But if you go back in the old pages of Fangoria, right around, I think it was issue 69, there's a couple issues back then that deal with interviews and articles on Brain Damage. I want to say initially he was promised $2 million. Now, this is basically a studio film for him. I mean, jumping from the independent ranks and getting a chance, basically selling the rights off and being, dependent on the MPA and people cutting it up. And but as he says, you gotta, there's an exchange here. I mean, you're gonna market your film, you're gonna get people in, and hope that someday they'll get to see the uncensored cut, which eventually that day came. Right? But there were some significant portions of this film that did get cut for home video release. And how much did they take away from the movie? Well, anytime you go in and censor someone, it's going to take away, I mean, from original intent, right? But, so, it is an opportunity for him, though, to sort of step up his game and but continue to keep himself surrounded by familiar faces and do something on just a little bit of a bigger stage. And Brain Damage works to great effect. Now, if you've never seen Brain Damage and you're not very familiar with Henenlotter, I can tell you that the 22 Shots of Moodz and Horror did have dealt with him on a couple occasions, I think. Once on a trilogy, Director Spotlight, I think twice maybe. This is one of them that was tucked in between two other films. I'm just gonna guess it was Basket Case and Frankenhooker maybe. And so, anyways, you can check that out. But the Arrow release is a great release. But anyways, what you have here, if you've never seen Brain Damage, what you basically have here is a film that struggles with both a Faustian undercurrent and this notion of dependence gone terribly wrong. a lot can be said about Henenlotter's own struggle with abuse, cocaine, I think it was, and even in the movie, you got your core characters are Brian, yeah, Brian, euphemism for brain, I guess. Him and his brother Mike live in an apartment, and Brian, of course, has his girlfriend Barbara. He's a relationship going on, and everything. I mean, everything seems to be going as well as it could be going. That is until Morris and Martha. This is an apartment complex, right? And they have been the caretakers to this parasite. And we find out this parasite Aylmer, who has we get a little bit of a backdrop going back as early as the Middle Ages, and changes hands frequently, and every once in a while there's a caretaker that kind of gets the upper edge on Elmer, and Morris and Martha are the last who have had an upper hand. They know how to feed him correctly. His diet consists of brains, but you can't feed him human brains. You got to feed him animal brains if you want to just keep him, semi weakened, in a weakened state. And plus, they get the benefit of feeding off his juice. Now, his juice is sort of the drug element here, and that's how he basically keeps people dependent upon him. And so Morris and Martha have reversed that, and they basically have Elmer dependent on them, which is probably the way it ought to be, right? Well, Elmer's he's had enough of that, and at some point in the middle of the night or something, he has found a way to vacate that premises, and he's found his way into Brian's bedroom, and he has attached himself to Brian, and Brian, his introduction to Elmer is basically just waking up with bloody sheets and not knowing what the heck has happened. Now, he's supposed to go out on a date with his girl Barbara. Of course, he cancels that in a jiffy because he feels awful, feels sick, he doesn't know what's going on. And that begins Brian's descent. I really don't want to go on terribly too long here, but I think I've already set up a nice segue into the rest of the film. At first, Brian, like most who have come under become hypnotized by Elmer and his drug-induced state, he's all for it initially, which is scary, man, because very quickly he will disassociate himself from not only his girl Barbara, but his own brother. And now there'll be a sobering moment for him when he'll confront Elmer, and but Elmer basically lays it out, buddy. You're dependent on me, and if you want to play, a strength of wills here, we'll see who wins. And of course, once you've been injected, you can't live without it, without ultimately shriveling up and going to some coma-induced death spiral. And so he tries to test wills with him in this really grimy apartment. He's vacated his own apartment with his brother. And since then, of course, his brother has moved into his spot with his girl Barbara, which sets up for a very, very awkward scene. Awkward in the sense that it's uncomfortable, because you really, really feel for Brian, even though he'll lose his battle of wills with Elmer. And he will decide to, you know what, this is my life now, and I'm got to make the most out of it. And that means a permanent severance from his girl, from those around him, really. And that underlies, just the scariness of dependence, be it, it could be drugs, obviously drug. Apparently there's the Stephen King book Cujo is on a tabletop, I think, in Brian's room. I didn't even think to look for it. But at the time that Stephen King wrote Cujo, he was struggling with a dependence as well. And so, that current runs pretty strong in this movie. I mean, the hallucinations are absolutely mind-bending. It's just, it works to such perfect, it just works perfect on the screen. And, and it's scary to think that you can be so dependent upon something that you will sever ties with anyone and everyone around you. I mean, this is drug abuse, right? But not just that, anything you become dependent upon. I mean, I mean, I don't step on any toes, but I mean, you can become so dependent on government that one day, if you wake up without government, who are you? And it's an interesting idea of you know, in the early 80s coming through, there was quite a few films that asked the question, what does it mean to be human? And in 1988, I think Henenlotter still asking that question. Really, what does it mean to be human, to be independent, self governed, I guess is a way to phrase it, free, in control. There's a lot of interesting philosophical questions at work here in this movie, even in the midst of some of the carnage and some of that carnage that will be cut out, at least until, we finally got, Arrow. And I'm not sure if people got to see it uncut before. I'm not sure when that really hit full stride with being able to finally see scenes that were cut out. But thankfully, all those scenes survived. I mean, there's, you got the infamous toilet scene, toilet stall scene. I guess pretty gruesome. You got the infamous scene of Brian and a girl he picks up at a club just outside behind the club. That is, something at best. That is something. But I alluded to this one scene though, when Brian eventually comes back to the apartment, having lost his battle of the wits with Elmer. He basically tells, when he first comes back in the middle of the night, he wakes up to the sound of his brother and Barbara at it. And, there's this uncomfortable sense that it's weird, the vibe you get off of him. It's kind of like, it's something he doesn't want to be, but at this point, there's nothing else he can do. And so he, at that point, he'll basically, confront them both and tell them, look, I'm a dangerous foe now. You need to get out of here, or it's not going to be pretty for you. And so, it's kind of an uncomfortable, unsettling moment for him, but he will leave to give them a chance to leave, but Barbara will chase him down to the subway. And that's where you will get one of the greatest cameos ever in film history. And I'm not even going to tell you what that cameo is. I'm just going to leave it there just in case you have never seen this. I would heavily suggest, though, you check out Basket Case first if you've never seen that, and then jump into some Brain Damage. And there is a great cameo. And the conclusion does bring, Morris and Martha. They've been sort of like mild antagonists in terms of being a thorn in Brian's side. You'll have a final confrontation at the end between Brian with Elmer and with Morris and Martha, his wife, in a confrontation of who is going to be the caretaker of Elmer. And it's interesting how that all ends. So anyways, Brain Damage from 1988, Henenlotter. This is one of those movies, man. The first time you watch it, you may just be like, what the heck did I just watch? But then after the second, third viewing, you start to really pick up on what's going on, and maybe even the first time. It does work underneath the surface for sure, definitely. So from 1988, Henenlotter's Brain Damage. Now he'll go on, of course, in 90 to do Basket Case 2, and then shortly thereafter, Basket Case 3. The special effects on this are awesome. The gross out scenes are gross out scenes. The blood runs pretty vibrantly. The hallucination sequences are out of this world. It's a fun trip. It's a fun trip. I think I've covered just about everything without really ruining much of it. So, as I said, we are a couple weeks of random reviews, and we are heading towards Asian Horror Volume 2. And we always leave these things off with Go Bills.